Good morning. I'm Cathy Van Bruggen of Cathy Van Bruggen Designs. I'd like to talk to you a little bit about needle turn applique. There are so many easy ways of appliquing, and the methods are many, but I particularly like needle turn because it's so direct and there's very little preparation. First of all, I'd like to talk to you, though, a little bit about the background fabric that you're going to be putting your appliques on. Fabric has two widths. One crosswise width is a little stretch. The grain straight up and down will not have any stretch at all. So when you're cutting your background, make sure that your straight of grain is going along the sides of your background. This way you'll be assured that after you put all of your applique pieces on, it's not going to stretch out of shape. The needles that we use for needle turn applique is a straw needle, like the straw that you drink from. Many people call the straw needles milliners. They're actually two different things. The milliners, I find, will bend more easily. They aren't quite as strong as the straw needles, but they're a good substitute. So just be aware when you use a milliner's needle that it's going to bend some and you may throw more of them away. Needles start at a size 9 and go up to a size 12. This is a size 10 straw needle, so one I recommend. It's strong, has an eye that you can actually thread, and it works very well. If you go up to a size 12, for instance, the needle is going to be finer and your eye is going to be that much smaller. On the straight pins, we all have great big straight pins in our pin cushions, but the straight pin that you need to use is much shorter. Now, there's such a thing as an applique pin, but I find these applique pins at only a ½ inch long are really too short for me to handle. So the straight pin that I prefer is about 1 inch long, so number 17, has a little ball on the end, and these work perfectly for holding your applique pieces in place. Another thing that we're going to need are scissors. We're going to be working with freezer paper, so we need paper scissors. We're going to need an embroidery size pair of scissors, and the one that I most recommend for scissors are hardanger scissors. Hardanger is a type of lace that you have to cut right into the little corners. And that's why I like these, because you can really get down in deep into those valleys and it cuts right to the tip. They also have large finger holes, which make it very, very easy and convenient to use. Marking pencils, we need to have regular mechanical pencils. This is a Bic, nothing special here. You can get them at the stationery store. It's just a very fine, dark line, and we would be using these to draw on freezer paper and also to draw on light-colored fabrics. If we're working on dark-colored fabrics, we're going to need either a chalk pencil, but these we're going to have to sharpen regularly, or I like the bone white pencil. It's a mechanical pencil, stays very sharp, very small, refillable. So this is what I actually prefer to get that fine line. Threads are something that we need to talk about. I prefer a 60 weight polyester thread. That might be a surprise to you, but I find the 60 weight polyester thread or bobbin filler thread is so fine that it will hide your stitches. Although I have had students tell me that if they're going to put all the work into hand applique, they want their stitches to show, but actually we're looking for an invisible stitch. I package these on plastic bobbins. There's more than 100 yards of thread in each color on the bobbins. And the reason I package them with plastic bobbins is that by the time you've used these for a couple of years, if you're using cardboard bobbins, which are wonderful for the machine, the cardboard bobbins will start to disintegrate. So just a word of warning, if you're using the cardboard bobbins, then you do need to be careful how you put them in and out of your little container. Thimble is another thing we're going to need. If you aren't used to using a thimble, by all means try to get used to it. You wear it on your middle finger. You're hitting the end of the needle either with the tip of your thimble or with the edge of your thimble. And I find that this is really a finger saver. The main thing with a thimble is that they need to fit. If it flies across the room while you're using it, you need to change sizes. It should be so comfortable that you don't even know you have it on when you get up to fix dinner. So thimble is really important. Another thing that I like to have in my sewing kit is a little glue stick. It can be Elmer's, it can be anything that you might have around the house. I don't particularly use a lot of glue. Just a little bit on the tip of your needle sometimes helps those wispy little threads. Now I'd like to tell you just the basics of how we prepare our applique. There are 4 basic steps. The first step is to trace your shape on freezer paper. And freezer paper, I might add, has 2 sides. The freezer paper has a dry side, which you draw on. The other side is shiny. And after you cut out your shape, you can press it onto your fabric, and it's going to stay there temporarily until you're ready to take it off. Freezer paper can be found in your grocery market, by the way, by your saran wrap and tin foil. After you have traced your shape, you're going to cut it out on the line. Place it on top of your fabric. The reason I like to always work on top of my fabric is because then you'll never have to reverse your patterns because you aren't working on the wrong side. So if you just keep in mind, work on the top of the fabric, you'll never have to reverse another pattern again. After you've pressed this on your chosen fabric, you're going to take your pencil. In this case, our fabric is light, so we would use a regular mechanical pencil. Trace the shape of the star on your fabric, and while the freezer paper is still on the fabric, cut a little less than a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now, you don't have to worry about drawing it. The 1/4 inch seam allowance is not critical, but what is critical is this traced line, because that's the line that's going to tell you how to turn your seam allowances under. So when the freezer paper is off, you will have the shape. You'll have the drawn line, which is your turn line, your seam allowance, and then we're ready to just place it on your background. It's just that simple. Okay. Just as a review, the steps in preparing your applique is to trace on your freezer paper, cut it out on the line, press on your chosen fabric, then you're going to draw your line around the shape of the star. That's going to be the shape that you turn, the line that you turn under. Then cut a 1/4 inch seam allowance or a little less. Then you're going to have a turn line, a seam allowance, your shape, which is going to go on your background, and you're ready to stitch. Now, before we're ready to stitch, I'd like to tell you a little bit about the invisible stitch. Now, the invisible stitch, let's say we were doing a leaf. On the invisible stitch, you wouldn't start at the point, you wouldn't start at the valley, you're going to start somewhere here on the side. So when you bring your needle up through the fold, the secret of an invisible stitch is to make sure that your needle stays parallel with the fold. You're going to put your needle right back into the background where your needle comes, where your thread is coming up. Go under the background, come back up about 1/8 of an inch away, barely catching the fold. Now, if we caught the fold out here, you could see that stitch. So we're barely going to catch the folded edge and continue on. Now, the way you can tell whether or not you're holding your needle correctly and putting it into the background correctly, turn it on the back side, and if your stitches are a little running stitch, you're keeping your needle parallel. If you're finding that your stitches are on the back are going at a slant, that means that you're probably putting your needle in the opposite direction. And quite frankly, you're twisting your arm and your wrist, and you're going to start having pain in your wrist. So that's a starter. We're going to actually work on our star now. Now we're first going to do a quilter's knot. I've threaded my needle. You point the tail of the needle to the point of the tail of the thread to the point of the needle. You're going to wrap this polyester thread probably 6 times. If you're using a cotton thread, probably 3 times will be enough. Now I have those wraps on my fingers, and you can feel them go right down the thread, and you'll wind up with this cute little quilter's knot that you use for embroidery. You use it for most anything that you need to work with. So to get started, I'm going to roll the shirt tail up over that pin so it's not in my way. We're going to put our needle up into that fold. Now I've just caught that line. As you can see, this is my turn line. Put your thumb on the line, and rather than roll the edge under, I find it much more successful if you stick it. See, it's off the edge. Tuck it under, pinch with your thumb, and pull back. It automatically turns for you. So for that invisible stitch, I'm going to go down into the background, up into the fold. And you can see when I go down into the background, I'm trying to catch the place the thread came out of the background and up into the fold. Down into the background. We don't want that line to show. I'm turning it all the way under. And I barely move my hand back, rock it back, so you can get right on the edge of that fold. Now, we're going to stitch right up to where the line stops. Tack stitch, that's just a little stitch in place. Now we're going to need to prepare this point because all of this fabric isn't going to go into that small little space. Most people would be tempted to cut your point off, but then you won't have anything to work with. So what we're going to do is to put your needle down temporarily. We're going to pull this edge back, and the seam that you just stitched, we're going to trim out about a 1/2 inch down. Get rid of half of that seam allowance. Now we've made room. Now turning the point, we're going to stick it, and when we stick it, we're going to get that point right along this sewn edge. So you stick it, twist and turn. Now I can feel my needle along that edge. Pinch. Just give your thread a little tug there to pull out the point. Take another little tack stitch. So I've taken a tack stitch before the point and after the point. Now the point is secure, so we're going to move our thumb down about a 1/2 inch, stick it, tuck it under your thumb. Now here's the secret of a sharp point. You're going to get your needle along this folded edge. So don't take your needle out until you've pulled it all the way down. And you can see what a nice sharp point you get. And I guarantee you'll get that sharp point every time. Ooh, we got a little wispy out there. There we go. And now we're going to continue on down. There we go. Now we're going to continue on down, and I'm going to show you how to do a valley. Tucking under the thread, and you notice I'm not rolling with my needle. I'm actually sticking it and tucking it under my thumb and then pinch. We're going to go down to about a 1/2 inch away from that valley. One more stitch. We're going to put our needle down for a moment. Now with any inside valleys, we're going to need to clip. But you notice I don't clip until I actually get there, because you're just asking for fraying. Now when I clipped all the way down to the line. Now this is the little trick of the trade. We're going to take our glue stick. Any kind of glue stick will work. And I'm just going to put a little bit of glue, poke your needle in the tip of the glue. And when I put my needle down in this little slot, I'm going to pinch off that little bit of glue so the needle goes in. My thumb can feel that glue on the edge, and I'm going to pinch it off and pull back. Now those little wispies are in control until I get down there to double tack. Now it's important to reinforce any inside V like this, because I don't want to lose my thread. If you don't reinforce, you're taking a chance of it coming out after it's been finished for a while. So I'm going to take 3 stitches right in place. Because there's actually no fabric right in this little spot at all. Your seam allowances are going in a V shape in the opposite direction. So now we're going to move back up, 1/2 inch away from your thread, tuck it under, pinch, and pull back toward your thread. And you get a nice clean valley. For some reason, you don't need to use the glue going up. It's only going down in to secure it. This thread is so fine that if you make a 1/2 inch hitch knot and pull down, you've got a little knot there so your needle doesn't fall out on you. Okay, I'm going to go right up there. I'm going to make another point for you. And the secret to this sharp point is to remember to trim out a little bit of your seam allowance. Tack stitch in place. We're going to trim. Half of that seam allowance goes away. And remember, we're going to stick it, twist and turn until you feel your needle along this finished seam allowance. Twist and turn, pinch there. We're going to take a second little tack stitch, move down a 1/2 inch, tuck it under, and remember, this is the secret. You're going to pull your needle down to that edge to get all of it back under. There we go. And we're ready to go. The main thing to remember is not to work more than a 1/2 inch away from your needle at any time, because then you'd lose control of holding on to it. So there you go, points and valleys. I've shown you all of the basics of needle turn applique the easy way. I hope you've enjoyed it. Please visit my website, and if you have any need for a personal teacher for your guild or organization, I would love to come and visit. Thank you again. Have a nice day.